Well, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, County Council poised to vote on vaccine passport requirement. What to expect from Governor Hogan's last year in office. Inflation hits your wallet with the highest rates in 40 years. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member and SkillSmart CEO Mike Knapp, and President of the Montgomery County Federation of Republican Women, Laurie Halverson. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan enters his final year in office with an unbelievable 74% approval rating in the latest Gonzalez opinion poll. Yet with a General Assembly heavily controlled by Democrats, Governor Hogan is likely to run into stiff opposition to his legislative agenda for reducing taxes and increasing funding for the police. Laurie, at the start of the General Assembly, there are likely four key areas of battle between the governor and the legislature. The first is on redistricting. The second is the continued COVID crisis. The third is what to do with the enormous budget surplus that has been handed to us. And finally, the governor's desire to increase funding for police. What is he going to be able to accomplish this term?
It's going to be tough. Revenues are expected to exceed projections by $1.6 billion in Maryland. So that's a lot of money for all of the Democratic legislators to play with. So I think they're going to want to have a heyday with that. So I'm hoping that redistricting is going to be the main thing that gets through this year. It is something that Hogan has been really focusing on ever since he came in office, and he's been working on bringing in judges. He's appointed most of the judges that are sitting right now, which will really help if it goes to the stage of going to court. And there are 2 lawsuits right now. So that's standing by just in case it doesn't go through with he has his own redistricting commission that it's appointed, and it was all very balanced and very bipartisan. And then there's another redistricting commission that is that's from the legislators, and they have created a very gerrymandered map. So they probably want that one to go forward, but they haven't voted on it, and they will vote on it, and they have 45 days to vote on a map. And if they don't vote on it, then Hogan's map just automatically becomes the new map. So we'll see, but I think redistricting is the one thing. I think policing will be quietly improving over time. I don't think that that's something that the Democrats are going to want to really say that they're putting money into it, but I think they will quietly.
Well, Mike, Laurie makes a good point. I mean, last year, the General Assembly focused heavily on police reform issues, especially with the new Speaker of the House and Senate Majority Leader, who are very active in those 2 regards. So are we going to see a more quiet General Assembly where things are going to be just on normal business issues, or are we going to see a more active General Assembly like we saw last year?
I don't think you're going to see as active a General Assembly as you saw last year. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on the financial resources, as Laurie indicated. I think that the legislature should be mindful of much of the surplus that we have as a result of the money that we receive from the federal government, and so you've got really some significant increases, but these are, if you can focus on one-time expenditures, and whether those are one-time expenditures that are investments or looking at tax reduction, I think they should take a balanced approach at that, because if you're not careful, you end up setting ourselves up for a cyclical we end up looking at the fiscal challenges that we've had in the past. And so, recognize where we are, put some money in for the rainy day fund, and then actually take a balanced approach to looking at potentially some measured tax reduction, while also making some key investments, but things that are one-time expenditures, not things that are going to continue on in your base budget for years to come.
Well, I mean, you didn't say the magic words, the Kirwan Commission or the Thornton Commission, either one of which had multiple unfunded mandates going forward. I mean, the issue really is, as I see it, is that The General Assembly made a statement last year in terms of new leadership and in new priorities. And the question is whether or not there was anything that was left undone after a very active session last year.
I think your point is right. I think if there was anything left undone, it was actually providing resources for some things. And so I think if they could take a measured approach and provide some of those additional resources this year, I think that's probably going to be where their approaches will be, especially going into an election year. I think as you add your question as it relates to the governor's police initiative, much of what's in there is increasing pay for state troopers, which probably looking at state troopers or police in local jurisdictions, most metrics indicate that they're probably paid less than their peers in other parts of the country, especially given the cost of living here. So that's probably not a bad thing to look at. But then there are also things like neighborhood grants and funding for initiatives like that, which I think the General Assembly recognizes you want to put public safety dollars as close to the people in the community as possible. And so I don't know that that actually is diametrically opposed to what the legislators did last year. I think it's providing more public safety resources for communities, and that's not a bad thing. And so I think you'll see some of those things happen. But I think, as Laurie indicated, it'll probably be in a more quiet approach than what the governor's laid out.
So Laurie, given the enormous popularity that the governor has, 74% approval rating is almost unheard of, particularly for a Republican governor in the state of Maryland. How does he take that personal popularity and to make it successful with the General Assembly?
He does. I mean, he seems to be getting along better with everyone than I think in the past few years. It's just so frustrating, though, that all of his vetoes are always overridden. And it's like the General Assembly forgets that the people voted for him and they support his views and what he stands for. So I don't know why, I just, I hope he can have even a bigger effect than in the past. So we'll see what happens, but he's got that wind behind him with all the people supporting it, and it's just amazing that 78% of Democrats are in favor of Hogan's job, according to a recent Gonzalez poll. So that is just amazing, considering he's a Republican.
Well, so let's take that popularity and that wind behind his back for our exit question, which is, Mike and Laurie, many Republicans have urged Governor Hogan to run against U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen for the U.S. Senate. But as the governor says, he really doesn't know what is he going to do. So first, Mike, and then Laurie, what's your prediction as to what Governor Hogan does?
I honestly don't think he wants to run. I think it's really hard to be a CEO and to have been a chief executive in a state and then run for the U.S., then be in the U.S. Senate, where you are one of 100 and your voice is fairly muted and it's difficult to kind of find a platform. That being said, I think it's too attractive for Republicans not to have somebody popular like him running in the state of Maryland, that I think he may end up doing it, but I really don't think his heart will be in it. And Chris is pretty popular as well. So I think, if he wanted to do it, I think it would be quite a race. I just don't think he really wants to do it.
Laurie.
Well, I think that Hogan really needs to run for state U.S. Senator, because the country really needs him and the state really needs him. I think that Van Hollen has proven that he's not really what has he done? I don't really know what he's done lately. I think he looks the part, but I think that Hogan acts the part and he actually does the work that needs to be done. So I would love to see Hogan run for U.S. Senator. And I think that he has an excellent chance of winning and, putting Van Hollen to pasture.
Well, I think Governor Hogan's has broader ambitions than the U.S. Senate. He certainly has flirted with the idea of running for president. We'll see
and that's what I think he might want to do as well.
Where that goes. But let's go on to our next topic, which is one that hits each one of us directly and personally. And that's when economists talk about the hidden drags on the economy. The first area that they look at is consumer confidence. And the major component of consumer confidence is the rise in the consumer price index, which this week climbed to 7% from 1.5% at the beginning of January of 2021. This is the highest consumer price index since can you wait for it, 82. So Mike, is in the most recent report, higher prices for food were the most notable contributor for the rise in inflation. And the Washington Post also is reporting that there are scarcity in our grocery stores along the region. What is going on here?
I mean, I think you're seeing, we've had challenges with the supply chain. I think you're continuing to see that. The question is this a national issue? Is this a local issue? And I think it's a national issue. I think we've seen that it's been an interesting challenge, but you look at food, you look at energy prices. I think one of the things that's become very clear is we thought that energy independence was a really good thing. Well, it is, except what we're finding out now is our own oil producers that are in the US want to make money just like those folks we imported oil from before. And so they're not inclined to reduce those energy prices. They're happy to have gas be $3.39 a gallon, and there doesn't appear to be any movement because there's no indication that there's actually a shortage of supply. So the question becomes, why aren't the prices coming back down since we have energy independence now? So, I mean, I think you've got some really interesting scenarios that are national issues that I think business has to take a look at, and I think it becomes a real challenge.
Oh, Mike, you were tap dancing through the raindrops on that one. I mean, my goodness, the first thing President Biden did was shut down the Keystone Pipeline and ban fracking on federal lands. Of course, the energy prices are going to rise.
But there's been no report of any shortage in supply. That's not been an issue at all.
That's because they're importing more oil.
No, we're not. We're high. We're at the highest oil producing point right now in our nation's history. We've got more locally produced oil today than we've ever had, and yet amazingly, our oil prices are as high as they've been in 40 years. Stunning. How do you think that happened?
They float up to the world market. So, but Laurie, the impact of inflation is felt by all of us at the gasoline pump and the grocery stores. Is there going to be a political impact from inflation?
Oh, sure.
Oh, yes. There was a poll, a Goucher poll in October, and 28% of voters feel that jobs and the economy are the number one issue. And even though we keep hearing from the Democrats, all social justice issues and all that are so important, that only got 13% approval as a top issue in that poll. So families, the biggest issue, inflation is the tip of the iceberg. Families are hurting right now. They're dipping into their 30% at least of families of voters are dipping into their retirement funds to be able to survive right now. Some of them are unemployed. Some of them are just trying to meet the needs with the inflation that's occurred. And a lot of them are trying to help their kids to get through a year of learning. Some of them are no longer in public schools, and they've had to, one person in the family may have stopped working so that they can teach their child at home, or they've had to pay for private school. So these are expenses that families didn't know that they were going to have a couple of years ago. So it's not just inflation. There's so much more happening within the family, and you better bet they're going to be voting in November much more than they voted in the past, because it really is hitting them, and they want to make a difference and vote for candidates that will support them.
So, Mike, it's a throw the bum out election.
Well, it's always a challenge, right? It's a midterm election. It generally goes to the other party anyway. So I think inflation will have a political ramification. I think there are a lot of factors. The economy always has an undue influence, I think, on an election in either direction. And you go back to 92, Clinton won because of the economy, and yet we ended up with the greatest economy we'd seen in the next 4 years, later put in place in large part by policies put in place by President Bush. So, I mean, it plays all of these different elements. And so I think you're going to see a real impact. The question becomes, how do you actually begin to affect the inflation and move us in the right direction?
Well, that's a great response, because I don't think any of us have that magic wand that we're going to be able to wave it and do away with the inflation that's baked into the cake right now. When we come back from the short break,
unfortunately, in either party. And so there are going to be a lot of folks talking about it from the right who are saying they've got some answer, and I'm pretty sure they don't. And the folks on the left obviously are really struggling to try and figure out what the answer is there too. So it should be a good conversation, which in a perfect world would bring us all back together again. But that doesn't seem to be the direction we're heading.
I'll leave it at that, because when we come back from this short break, the Montgomery County Council considers a vaccine passport mandate. Does that make any sense? Stay tuned. And welcome back. On Tuesday, January 18th, the Montgomery County Council will once again meet to decide what action, if any, it can take that will help to reduce the transmission of the Omicron COVID virus. One idea that has been proposed two times earlier by the council is a vaccine passport for certain indoor activities like health clubs, bars, and restaurants. Now, the two times before it was not passed. This is the third time. And proponents say that this is the only way to stop the spread. Opponents, however, say that it's a violation of one's civil liberties. The passports in itself are ineffective because everyone is getting COVID now. Who knows who's got it? And maybe it might even be racist because minorities, people of color, aren't able to get the vaccine. So, Laurie, the road to heaven is paved with good intentions. Is this vaccine passport, similar to the one going into effect in the District of Columbia tomorrow, something that the county should adopt?
Why does it have to come through the third time? Like, it seems like the more time passes, the more there's proof that it should not be something that we should do. And plus, we are 95% have 95% of Montgomery County residents have had the first dose already, and 84.5% have had are fully vaccinated. 45% have had the booster. So most of us, by far, in more than any of the other areas of the country, are vaccinated. So then you're doing this for just a tiny percentage of people who come to a restaurant, and you're making the restaurants go through a big rigmarole of checking IDs, and it's going to be so complicated, and there's going to be people upset. Patrons are going to be upset if they're turned away, and we don't need to do that to our restaurant owners. We really need to think of how is this affecting businesses when we're trying to grow businesses. It's unconstitutional. That's really the number one reason we shouldn't be doing this. It's unconstitutional. And I think that if they do pass this, this passport mandate, I think that we will see over time, very soon, that it's unconstitutional. It'll be determined that way. And our legislators, or our county councilmen who are voting for this, are going to really be on the wrong side of history, and it's not going to look good for them. So I really think that they should just not bother with this, and we could almost be over with this pandemic, moving to an endemic at this point.
So Mike, the one oddity here is last week.
There's only one.
Well, the only one that I'm bringing up. How's that? Is the CDC even acknowledged this past week that vaccinated people are able to spread COVID just like unvaccinated people. And particularly when it comes to the Omicron variant, which is highly contagious and easily spread. So just from the fact that it might be ineffective, is this a good idea to have these vaccine passports?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it just creates a level of frustration amongst everyone, as Laurie's indicating, whether it's the proprietor that has to try and figure out how to implement it and manage it, to the county that's got to try and oversee it. And again, so this is something that was proposed by the executive. This wasn't something the council came up with. This was something the executive put forward again, which I think is fascinating, given the fact that here's also the same executive that is struggling with trying to figure out how to make sure that county employees actually get vaccinated and making sure that we actually have people showing up to work. And so to me, the bigger issue is how do we address that and not spend as much time on the vaccine passport, because clearly this is something that, as we were talking about before the show began, we're getting to a point where this is becoming, we hope, more towards an endemic, where it's becoming clear that yes, it can be transported. But if you are vaccinated, then you'll get sick, but nowhere near the level that we're seeing a year ago, unless you don't have a vaccination. So let's make sure that people are getting vaccinated. Let's make sure we're focusing on that, recognizing that it is highly transmissible and people are going to get it. So how do we make sure that we mitigate against the fact that people are getting it and make sure that we can get healthy outcomes from that, as opposed to spending a lot of time focusing about whether or not people have the right card?
Well, the irony here, of course, is that the executive is not only vaccinated, but double boosted. And what I heard was that he was almost in self-quarantine before he got COVID. So, the fact is, COVID is all around us. It's not going to go away whether we have a piece of paper around our neck saying we've been vaccinated or not. And I think this is just bad public policy unless the council wants to feel like they're doing something. You know,
Well, and I don't know if the
because
council wants to
DC
feel.
did it. We've
Yeah,
got
I don't
to
know if
do
the
it.
council wants to feel like they're doing something. I think the executive felt like he needed to send something over again, and I just don't understand why. I mean, the other piece is that clearly, if you're not vaccinated, you're the people that are having the most difficulty and most difficult health challenges. And so it's very clear that if you're vaccinated, you can still get it, but you can actually manage through it okay. If you're not, you're probably going to get really sick and you run the risk of ending up in the hospital and having worse outcomes. And so let's focus on making sure that we get people vaccinated.
Well,
And it totally ignores the science that natural immunity occurs when you have had the virus. So that is just totally ignored. And they say, oh, we are following the science, but they are not following the science. So frustrating. And I think we're going to look back in the and say, hey, many of the policies that have happened across the world have been wrong for everyone. And hopefully we'll learn.
Challenging though. I know that they've been wrong. I think it's been evolutionary. We're in our fourth variant of this. It's evolved. We've evolved. How do you do this? We haven't had a pandemic in 100 years. I think we've learned a lot. And I think there are those who want to continue to point back and go, well, 18 months ago, you said this. Well, 18 months ago, we had a lot less information than we did 18 months later. And so I think the notion of being able to learn and evolve makes a whole lot of sense. But I think this policy goes back to where we were 12, 14 months ago. And I just don't see what benefit it provides.
Well, I'm glad we're in agreement for once. What a surprise! Stop the presses! Alert Bethesda beat. We're all in agreement for.
Well, and if you look at the comments section on Bethesda beat, you can see that most people do not approve of this mandate that they're trying to do. So I just hope that the county council will listen and actually do the right thing.
You know, I mean, there's some dopey ideas coming out of the county council. Craig Rice introduced a bill this week that would require restaurants to provide healthy choice for children's meals if they provide a children's meal. And I'm thinking, let the parents figure out what they want to buy their kid. Don't put the burden on the restaurants. But that's a topic for another show, and not today. So when we come back, stay tuned for Parting Shots. And now with Parting Shots, Mike Knapp.
Thank you very much. I just want to take a moment to welcome Dr. Jermaine Williams, who's going to be the new president of Montgomery College. He's coming to us from Nassau Community College, has a great track record. I think he's going to do some really exciting things for the college and the community going forward, and he'll begin the end of February. And I just want to thank Dr. Charlene Dukes, formerly of Prince George's Community College, who has been our interim chief for the last 6.5 months, and the work that she has done to kind of help navigate through this process as we continue to have to deal with COVID and just a variety of other issues that come up running a large community college. And then finally, just want to say, thoughts still go out to the students, whether you're a college student or you're a high school student or just an elementary school student. This is a challenging time. It's been a crazy 2 years, and thoughts and prayers continue to be with you. And how do we support you when we get to the other side, recognizing the challenges that you faced these last 2 years?
Thank you, Mike. And now with Laurie, with her parting shot, Laurie Halverson.
Yes, now that the general session is in session, there's a specific bill that Montgomery County needs to really pay attention to, and that's a bill for ranked choice voting. It's something that our delegates have been trying to get through for several years now, and they're trying it again. And I just want everyone to know out there that there's a lot of groups out there trying to sell this idea, supported by the Democrat Party, and the League of Women Voters is in support of it. And even though they are considered nonpartisan, they are not in Montgomery County, I have to say, unfortunately. The Republican part, the women's, Maryland's Federation of Republican Women is opposed to ranked choice voting in their legislative agenda. So just want everyone to be aware of that and to keep up with it and learn about it.
Well, thank you, Laurie. Here in Montgomery County, you got to be able to win an election before ranked choice voting
That's true.
becomes an issue. Maybe it'd be a good thing in Montgomery County. Maybe
no, it would not.
Maybe you can get some Republicans elected. All right, that's it for us. I want to thank the panel for being here. Mike, thank you on your day. You're moving your office. Thank you for being here. Laurie, thank you. Appreciate you coming on as always. And always, I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.